Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the main stage. I hope you're having a great conference. We're going into our fourth hour now. So we've had our opening session, our personal development sessions, and just finished up wonderful Common Grounds collaborations. So I hope you're not finished with aha moments because we've got a lot more to share today. And with me now is Michele Adams with Walmart and Nnaji with her insurance brokering and consulting company. She'll share more about real soon. But this topic is one that's super important to all of us. And I think not just because of what's happened in 2020, but because of who we are. We are better together. And this conversation around being an ally empowers everyone is part of what you'll hear much more of with the Alliance going forward. As I mentioned in the opening, we'll be much more intentional and purposeful in how we approach inclusion and belonging. And I know you'll hear much more about that now. So I'm going to go off stage, and Michele and Ngozi, have a great chat.
We will.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Michele Adams. I am now with Walmart, very proud to be part of the Walmart family. I joined Walmart in March of this year after proudly serving the previous 24 years at Walt Disney World in Orlando. And I'm really thrilled to be here with Ngozi today to talk about allyship and what does it really mean to be an ally. But before we jump in, I want to give Ngozi an opportunity to introduce herself and give you a little bit of information about her perspective and where she comes from in our mutual insurance industry fields that we both work in.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, Michele. So hello, everyone. Let me just start off by saying that I am so excited to be here. So I will be a little dramatic today, but that's all because of my excitement. But again, my name is Ngozi Nnaji. I am the principal managing partner of ACO Insurance Consulting, which is a recruiting and consulting firm that focuses on bringing Black and Brown talent into the insurance industry. We focus not only on the recruiting, but also the retention of that talent to increase representation in our lovely industry. And so what's interesting kind of about my story, so if you don't mind if I start off there, Michele.
Jump in.
That, generationally speaking, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I think I'm one of the few insurance nerds out there that kind of started their career like with intentionally going into the insurance industry. My dad, who's Nigerian, the father of three daughters, was very intentional about making sure that his daughters had a space, a place, had careers, knew what they were doing for the rest of their lives, so they wouldn't be dependent on anyone. And so he kind of handpicked careers for us. And here I am in high school, a junior in high school, and my dad's like, you are going to be an actuary. You're going to be in actuarial science. And I'm like, I don't know how to spell that, but okay. My dad's Nigerian, so you don't really say much other than okay. Yes, Dad. But lo and behold, left high school, went into a historically Black college university, Florida A&M University, where I got a degree in actuarial science. But as you probably can tell, I do have a big personality. And so I found myself quickly kind of determining that maybe this personality of mine was not yet kind of ready.
You don't fit the actuary profile for me from a personality standpoint. Let's just cut to the chase there. Yeah.
Most definitely. And so then I found myself 25 years later holding a variety of roles, not an actuary, but underwriting, business development, and production. I do own my own agency, but then also here I am as a consultant. So I just I bring that to light because I think, again, one of the few that kind of I have 2 degrees in insurance. So I'm very passionate about this industry. Spent 25 years in it. And so I love to be surrounded with people who are passionate about it as well and looking to move it forward in directions it's never been before, to expand, enhance, and to empower.
I think that's so great. It's really an interesting story. I'm so glad that you shared that because when I first learned and first met you and you shared that you were destined to be an actuary, I was like, no, there's a misalignment here. But I'm glad that it got you to where you are today. That's so great. there's so much that I want to unpack, but before we go there, one of the first things I wanted to talk about is, this is such an important topic. I love more than anything the title of this Alliance event, Better Together, because I don't think at any point that I can think of do we need to be reminded that we truly are better together than apart. There's just, we don't have, just everywhere you look in the world, there's division. And what we've really have focused on, I know what the Alliance has been very focused on it, is this idea that, we help each other out. And I love the idea of allyship. But before we, really dive into that, I want to know kind of what got you here to this conversation today. A little bit more about you. One of the things that you mentioned was, the organization that you're a part of is about helping to attract and retain Black and African American talent within the risk and insurance field. Tell me how did you get there? How did you realize, what? This is a place and a space that I need to carve out for myself because it's going to make a difference. So tell me about that.
It really happened about, 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I joined an organization called the National African American Insurance Association. And really at that point for me, I was in middle management. I really thought that, joining this organization would kind of look nice on my resume, give me some leverage, get promoted, take on a couple of roles, do a little bit of here and there. But, for me, it was just more, about being on paper. But, as I became kind of a member and started really engaging with the organization, I started to kind of develop this passion around, helping my people, right? Helping people who looked like me. I mean, at that point, I'd had almost 20 years in the business, and it really forced me to take a look back on my experience, my previous 20 years, and say, okay, what have you done? What's your legacy? Where have you been helpful to others? Whether they were women, whether they were Black professionals, across the board, what was your contribution? And I didn't have an answer. And so it really forced me to kind of assess what I was going to do for the next 20 years. And so although, that initial assessment was something that I identified about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know what to do with it, right? I grew into leadership roles within NAIA. I'm now on the national board. But still, I felt like there was more to do. And so, on the height of kind of BLM, Black Lives Matter, it was very apparent that there was these, a great concentration of Black professionals in our industry that, were getting recognized. And there was an opportunity to bring in new talent, new Black talent into our industry that we really weren't focusing on. And often asked in my role as I'm also the president of the Greater Hartford chapter here, is that in Greater Hartford, Connecticut, that, often asked by leaders, like, where's the Black talent? Help us find it. And I was like, well, if you're asking me, right, if you're a senior VP within this organization, you're asking me, a little old, president of a trade organization, where's the talent? Then there must be a real issue here. And so for me, that was the opportunity to really stand up something intentional to help connect the dots, to bring leaders into a world and a space where they can easily identify and attract, retain this talent that was out there. We've seen on the news, there's been some in other industries, leaders, CEOs that are saying there's not any talent.
Wells Fargo, I think, got some pretty big trouble with that. I'll say it. It's out there. I mean, it was stunning to hear somebody say that the talent doesn't exist. And I think that they've been proven very wrong.
Oh, most definitely. And so that's where I said, okay, so if you're not going to put forth the effort to look, right, and if you are genuinely saying you don't know where they are, well, let me help you. Let me give you
That's great. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think part of this conversation, Michele, is that, Kim, in our previous discussions, we've talked about, Kimberly talked about, here we are recruiting. We're looking at attracting, right? There's a big push to go to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. But I think the part that we tend to forget as an industry is, what do we do when the talent is in our ranks? Like, what do we do after we get them there? And I think that's the kind of the formula we have at ACO, is that you have the recruiting, you have the retention piece, right? We talk about belonging, inclusivity. That is the only way 1 + 1 = 2 to get to the representation and increase representation. Because if you're only focusing on recruiting, you're going to be like a mouse in a wheel, right? Keep churning. and you won't have any impact on representation within your organization. And you'll find yourself replacing positions constantly, constantly, as you try to look for that goal.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because that retention piece, I mean, anybody who's in a position where they have to hire, they know how important it is to make it sticky, right? We want to not just get you in the door, but we want to keep you, because, you know, just from a pure business standpoint, it's, you know, what we invest to bring people on, to only turn around and lose them. What are the blind spots that, you know, when we think about allyship and, you know, I don't want to jump to the solve, but because I do that sometimes, but, you know, why do talented people leave organizations? And in particular, when we're thinking about the groups that you work with that are underrepresented, is it just that they don't feel like they belong? I mean, is it multiple things, or is there one thing? I mean, what can we do better?
I think it boils down to not feeling a sense of belonging. I mean, I think in any aspect of this conversation, because even if you talk about, you know, people who are 10 years in the business, they've been with the company for a while, they leave because they don't feel belonging, because maybe that company has not invested in them the way they should for their development, for their professional development. Again, I think to me, that's a component of not feeling belonging, right? Because if I belonged, right, and you really cared about me, then you would invest the resources, the time, the effort to see me succeed and thrive within your organization. But I also think companies, you know, think too hard about it. I mean, just putting it out there on the table, because I think sometimes, especially when you have individuals, Black individuals, where we're just looking sometimes for a network, right? We're looking for support, right? We're looking for, you know, even when you bring us on, who are you connecting us with? If I'm the only person in your regional office and I look around and no one looks like me, who are you connecting me to so that I can have a network of people that look like me? Are you connecting me to your ERG, Employee Resource Group? Or are you connecting me to trade organizations that are minority based, like NAYA, like LAYA, like KAYA, you know, or even the Alliance, right? If it's women coming into the organization that might feel disconnected wherever they might be. What connections are we helping these individuals make when they come on board? And to me, that's like low-hanging fruit. That's kind of simple to do. An email goes out, someone calls them, right? It's a Zoom 15-minute call to say, hey, welcome to the organization. We're glad to have you. Let's connect. Here's my name and number. If you need anything, I'm here for you. And so I think we need to do a better job at looking at the simple solutions, right? The low-hanging fruit, to make people feel like they're a part of something bigger, a part of a culture that cares for them.
I think that's just so important. And, you know, you have to also look at yourself and say, you know, where do they have leaders that look like them? Mm-hmm. Do they have other people that, and I say them, I mean, all of us, like, I know that I want to have, if I'm aspiring to a different position, does it look like I could get there based on the representation of those ranks? Right. So that's so critical. But yeah, that's, and I love your idea of just the simple connect me to the groups that might make me feel even more welcome and more like I belong. And most companies, you know, have some type of resource group or something like that. I wrote that down. I'm taking that back. I love that. This is supposed to be an interview, but it's really just a one-on-one lesson for me. So just everybody else gets to watch. Fine. So talk to me about like where we are today, right? So Kimberly said, you know, here we are in 2020, which, you know, wow. I don't even have the right adjectives.
In a year, definitely.
Yeah, and it's not over. So we think about where we are today in this journey, and you've probably experienced lots of changes. I know I have. Like my perspective on what I think, I always thought that I got it, right? Whatever it is. When we think about this allyship, this topic, and belonging, I always felt like, you know what, I'm ahead of the curve on it. And I think I shared with you, I went through 16 hours of the Racial Equity Institute, and it completely blew my mind. And I realized, Michele, you are so not where you thought you were. And a lot of that was prompted by all of the current events that we've seen. But then when we got, you know, to the process, we were talking about this event today, and we thought about allyship. I thought, you know what? I don't know that I even really know for myself how I should think about an ally. And I'd love to know, like, where are you today on this journey, and what are your thoughts on that?
So I have to admit as well, Michele, I was telling you earlier, even before we got onto this webinar, that my perceptions, my thoughts, my ideas around allyship, even mentorship and sponsorship, have morphed over the last 12 months. And it's based on, my personal experiences, what I'm seeing with the current events, the engagements, the networking I'm partaking in. But I think, but that's part of kind of the concept of allyship for me, is that, with allyship or diversity inclusion, all of it, they're evolutions. They will evolve for all of us in some, form or fashion. But what I will say, just the level set is, I think everyone would agree. I mean, allyship is about action, right? First and foremost, right? It's not a noun, it's an action verb. And so when we think about allyship, we think about doing something, not just being, but doing. And I think second to that, when I think about allyship, kind of a hallmark of what it is that, although it's evolving, I think you have to take a first step in your decision to be an ally, to reflect on yourself, right? Similar to kind of what you said earlier. Because I think to be an ally, or to be engaging in allyship, you first have to understand where you are, right? Assess who you are. Because I do think allyship takes various forms and fashion. It can be a movement, right? You can be in the cause. You can march down the street and with your signs and advocate for Black lives, or it can be very individualized and personal. I think allyship, but you have to assess where you are in your journey. I think there's some people who come into diversity and who are just like, I'm just appreciating diversity for what it is. They haven't been forced to look diversity in the face and say, okay, this is now a part of my world. But now that they are, their journey might not be, like someone like me, right? Where I grew up and, I was taught that color was something like you color conscious, being color aware was a part of my world versus being color blind. So that diversity conversation was a part of my household from the day I could talk, right? Even before I could talk, right? It was part of the teachings of my family. So recognizing my journey might be a little bit more extensive. I might have experienced more, right? Been subject to kind of discrimination and racism that kind of forced me to kind of, again, be aware, but where others might not, right? And so we have to just take an assessment of each of ourselves before we say, I want to be an ally, because again, your allyship might look very different from someone who has had a journey like me versus not. So I think,
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just going to say, so I think fundamentally, before we start to talk about what we're going to do, we have to recognize that it's a verb, it takes action, and that my allyship might not look like your allyship.
It's funny because a couple of things that's triggered for me and thinking about is, one of the things that I've always thought about in terms of allyship, it's not what we say when we're standing next to each other, it's what I say when you're not there, and how I have your back. And am I promoting the things that I believe and not and to better the interests of all, right? And not just myself, number one. One of the things that I've been really reflecting on, particularly because we're talking about this Alliance event, and Kimberly and I have shared this, and I've shared it with you, but back in 2014, that was the year that a bunch of women got together in a conference room in Boston and said, what are our thoughts around, putting together a group for women in workers' comp? And we, tried to figure out, is it an alliance? Is it a coalition? I remember going back and forth, and we felt so good about what we were doing because we said, this is going to promote inclusivity. This is for women. This is, we're underrepresented in terms of the leadership ranks in our industry. But now I look back with very different eyes and realize, as inclusive as we thought we were being, we weren't, because there wasn't, that I can recall, and it was a small group, any woman who was Black or African American in that room. We missed a real opportunity to really broaden our definition of representation and inclusivity. And it just shows that this is a journey, right? We are so well intended. We want to do the right thing. We want to do it for the right reasons, but we're still learning, and we're still kind of in our infancy.
Well, and I think that's exactly right. You have to start somewhere. Starting somewhere is better than not starting at all, right? And so you have to start somewhere. But again, keeping your eyes open and your mind open about what could be and what it will look like is something that we have to continue to do. Because again, if we think about diversity, you know, I was just telling you and Kimberly, like, you know, when you think about diversity, we used to call it just diversity. Then we changed it to diversity and inclusion. And then we are like, oh, no, wait, inclusion should be first. So inclusion and diversity. And then we added equity, and then we added belonging. You know what I mean? So just the title of diversity is changing. So, you know, how can we not expect that the context of what we're talking about, the content of what we're talking about will not evolve as well? And I think the more we experience, the more that we engage, the more that our perspectives will change, right? And so we just have to give ourselves the grace in which to do that, the latitude in which to do that. And I think, you know, kudos for you guys as a group to say, okay, we need to do something. And granted, maybe it doesn't look like, you know, what it did then, what it looks like today, but that's okay, right? You're moving towards the right direction so that inclusivity is defined by everything and everyone. So I would say 2014 was, you know, the beginning of something great, and it has been as for the Alliance.
Yeah, it's hard to believe if you were to ask me how long ago, I would have said, oh, it was just a couple of years ago. I can't believe that was 2014. And look at where we are today, all at home, but able to still connect and have these really great conversations about kind of the positive outlook for all of us. So it's super exciting for me. I would love to know, you know, allyship in action. What does that look like for you? If somebody were to say, you know, I want you to be my ally. I mean, I don't know. I think about mentors that way, but allyship, tell me, what does it look like in action to you? Well, particularly, one of the things I really want to know is your perspective. Again, I told you, I'm here to learn for me. I think we've all been really forced to have hard conversations with ourselves. And I feel a deep, deep amount of respect for my Black and African-American colleagues in this industry, because I know we're coming to you and saying, help me understand, help me know better. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about that as well, because I don't just want to know your opinion on allyship. I want to know about it from you, you know, as a woman of Nigerian descent. Tell me what this is like for you, because your experience is going to be very different from me as a white girl growing up in Lakeland, Florida.
So, well, at least we grew up in Florida together. That's good.
As crazy as Florida is, you know, look at what you get.
But okay, so you asked a lot there. I mean, I think for me, when you apply allyship, when you put it into action, which it is an action, you know, it takes the form. Well, let me back up, because I always tell people I have this term I call the trilogy, where for me, you know, when we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, right, I firmly believe you can't have mentorship or sponsorship without first having allyship. And for me, allyship is the ability for someone who has privilege, who is in a space where, you know, they have the power to potentially speak on behalf of, step into the place of those that are oppressed or marginalized. Now, granted, that could be an entire group of people. It could be an individual, you know, depending on where you are in your journey. So, you know, it could be anywhere from, again, speaking in a room on behalf of, right? But sometimes that looks like sponsorship, right? Whether it's for an individual, for a group of people. So again, going back to my point that you can't really have sponsorship without having allyship first. Understanding that you might have to stand up, right, for people where even though you might not understand what you're fully standing up for, right? But understanding that it's wrong, understand that it's not, you know, it's not just. And I think sometimes that means, you know, again, marching in the streets, right? Utilizing your voice when you might not always understand kind of what that oppression feels like, what that oppression looks like, but understanding again that it's wrong and the justice needs to be had. And so I think, again, you know, I've seen people and I've talked to people where for them allyship is more, like I said, individualized, right? Mm-hmm. And it's about, you know, someone who might not have an opportunity, who might be, again, oppressed, marginalized, whatever the case might be, but even in small spaces, right? Whether it's for an opportunity, a job, whether it's for just, on behalf of a project or a situation, but being that voice where they don't have a voice, and is speaking on their behalf. But again, it all works together. Mentorship, allyship, and sponsorship all work together. And so I really feel that, as part of our journey around being an ally and putting those actions into place, we just first need to understand that, we're dealing with, I have power, I have privilege, and that other party does not. And I need to put my power and privilege in and put it to action so that these individuals that are oppressed can be seen, can be heard, can, be dealt with justly, right? And so I think those are the things we just have to consider when we start to identify what am I going to do and how I'm going to do it. Now, the other question you asked me about, as a Black woman, how do I feel about all this? And I'm gonna kind of speak to my Black colleagues here, because I think there's a part of me that, I get that we might be feeling some level of frustration, right? Like in this moment, right, we are being asked, well, what do you need? How are you feeling? What do I do? And those are all valid questions, because I think they're coming from a very genuine place. And I think sometimes as Black people, we look at that and say, okay, why do I always have to provide the answers? Why are you always coming to me, right? Versus, having, or encouraging them to kind of figure it out for them, or wanting them to figure it out for themselves. We're kind of get frustrated in the fact that, we always have to bring the solutions, right? But I think there's an opportunity for us to take a step back and just kind of, breathe a little bit, because if, what's the alternative to that, right? No one asked. Right?
I've heard somebody say, "Oh, you're listening now," right? How I've been saying it in such a loud voice all this time, and now you want me to? Now I need, you're going to listen to me this time. So yeah,
and I think that's okay to feel the frustration, but I think there's also this point at which you have to say, okay, right? Yes, I'm frustrated, but yes, they are asking, and they're being genuine about it, and they want to know. And then, I think part of it for us, as well as Black professionals or in the Black community in general, if you're asking, right, and you want to know, also understand that we need to have our own safe space to have our own conversations as well, right? Because we need an outlet, right? Because we can't always take on the pressure and the stress and then continue to have it build upon. And now you want answers, and now we have to solve this, right? Again, in our mind, this is what we're thinking, and not have a way to have an outlet and have that discussion outside of kind of the context, especially of the four walls of our profession and work, right? We have to have spaces and places that we can talk, and we can solve for ourselves what we need to do with our emotions, what we need to do with the what we're feeling, and how we want to respond. So I think part of it for us is that, I wish as Black people, we wouldn't get as mad as much around the questions, right? Because I think they will help us get to the point at which we're all at a better place of understanding, right? What needs to be done going forward. I think we just need to, we need to accept that these are questions that need answers to some degree, but then help guide those answers, right? Maybe it's a matter of, leading them towards a book, or leading them to an article, or, exposing them to a conversation like this so they can better understand, versus just giving them the answer off the jump, right? Have them do a little research and understanding themselves about what the oppression is, what's the situation, and why am I, why do I feel the way I do, and potentially help you to understand what I need as a Black professional, as it relates to kind of, moving my career, my journey, my, whatever I need forward.
One of the ways I think about it is the place, the space, and the grace, right? I need the grace. I need you to know I'm not going to get it right. I'm not going to ask you the question probably the way that you would like me to ask you, but I'm doing it with the best way I can, with the most well-intentioned approach. One of the things that I've really tried to take a step back and think about for myself just is, simple things like how we think about talent and talent management. And the best people that we can talk to about that, honestly, is somebody who looks like you, right? I don't know what it's like to be a Black or African-American person or Latinx or LGBTQ in my organization, because I'm not any of those things. So I need to talk to the people who have that perspective, that experience, and can tell me, you know what, Michele, you got it right here, but you're really missing the boat over here. You're not capturing it. So I think on behalf of all white people, I just want to say thank you for dealing with, like, for me, my lack of ability to exactly know, but I so appreciate the fact that you give me the grace to ask the questions, because, we all just want to do better and get better. And we're getting down to, like, we've got about 15 minutes, and I've got some questions that I really want to make sure that I ask you, because this is just such a great conversation. I feel like I know this, but what is your superpower that you're bringing in? You knew I was going to ask you that. And other than the most fantastic glasses that I've ever seen, and you've got me like staring at them, wanting to go on Warby Parker or something and order some new glasses today. Tell me your superpower and what keeps you energized, what keeps you positive, right? Because it's, the world is not very positive right now. And I think we all need an ally, right? We need we all need emotional support people. So what is your superpower that's keeping you going?
I don't know. We talked about this a little bit, and so I think my answer is changing a little bit as I think more about it. But for me, my superpower, I think, is bringing people together, right? Like I often think about, like, kind of all the networking I do and the places and spaces I've been. But, I am passionate about bringing people together. So, and the premise around that really is for me, this DEI work that we're trying to do as an industry, we can't do it as individuals, right? We have to do it as an industry. So it's going to take collaboration. It's going to take networking. It's going to take, people, getting on the phone, getting on Zoom calls, doing what we need to do together. I mean, there's a lot of great things going on in our industry around diversity that no one knows about. And we need to bring that to the forefront. And so those things that are already in action, that are already happening, why do we have to recreate the wheel just because we want our names on it, right? Like, why can't we leverage what's already being done, bring people together, and move it forward even faster, right? Have those, increase the number of discussions that we're having and make great strides because we're doing it together. Oftentimes in our industry, especially as insurance companies, as brokers, we're competing, right? No, you can't see this, or you can't look at our rates or forms, or we're competing for the same business. But I think there's a time, and this is the time to kind of put that down and let's think about what we can do as an industry, whether it's, commissioners, whether it's, the heads of insurance companies, whether it's risk managers who are, in the trenches, right? What can we do as an industry to really make a difference? And so I'd like to consider myself kind of one of those individuals that the magic happens when I bring the people together. And if we all have one vision, and that is to diversify our industry, then we can make it work. We can all come together and play a role and a part in that.
That's so great. I love that. Yeah, you are. We're gonna have to, like, come up with I don't know what your logo is, but man, I see the links. Like, man, I think that
chest.
Get matching shirts.
Right.
No, I think that's really great. And so the idea that, you're right. In this industry, there's so much competition, but I love the idea of the previous session being common ground, but this is where we have common ground. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot more that we're working on together that we can actually, all competitors, you can come across the table because we're all trying to work on the same thing. And just make it a more inclusive and a better industry. And I think there's just such opportunity. There's so many brilliant minds. There's so many just really insightful, intelligent people. I didn't know you until this, and I'm like, now we're like best friends. So,
yes, we are.
So I've got this new connection. Let me, one of the, my husband, if he hears me, he's going to have a heart attack because he's just so sick of me talking about this. And I'm going to do a shameless plug right now. There is a new show out on Apple, and it's called Ted Lasso. And I've told everybody to watch it. It's a 7-episode series. Jason Sudeikis is in it. And I think it's either the 6th or 7th episode is probably my favorite, because he talks about I'm not going to give anything away if you haven't seen it, but he talks about curiosity and the fact that people just maybe aren't curious enough sometimes. And I would like to know from you, what do you wish people would ask you? What do you wish people would ask about you? What do you wish they were curious about you?
Okay, so I thought about this. So audience, she prepped me and I did not have an answer when she first asked me. So I had to really think about it. So for me, you know, I'm looking at it in two different, you know, professionally and kind of just generally like personally. I think professionally, you know, I wish people would ask me, you know, kind of the why, you know, why do I do what I do? Right.
Oh, I love it.
Because I think
so
people,
tell us, why do you do what you do?
Because you know, I'm a mother of four, right? I own three businesses, right? I'm a volunteer. I do a lot of stuff. But what I tell people is that, you know, they look at me and they're like, you're doing too much. You're all over the place. I always see you online on, you know, conferences, But I do it because I realize I have a voice, right? I realize that, you know, not that I always say the right things and that I'm always kind of, you know, PC when I say it, but I understand that, you know, God has given me and provided me this voice that people, you know, sometimes listen to, not my kids, but people listen to. But, you know, for me, that's my why. Like if I have this gift, and maybe that should be my superpower, right? My voice. But if I have this gift, right, and I can use it in, you know, with my volunteerism, with my businesses, and kind of continue to be passionate about it. Like, I want you to understand that that's the why I do it. I don't do it just, you know, to show my face and just be all over the place and have a crazy life. But I do it because I really believe that my voice can make a difference. And so one of the things I've been telling people, and we, you know, obviously we're still in election season, is that, you know, that everyone has a voice to some degree, and we should understand that our voice is important. And so I think for me, I just want people to understand that that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm involved in so many things. It's because I want to share my voice, and I have a voice, I think, for the most part, for, you know, for people who don't, right? When I think about the Black professional, when I think about, you know, single mothers with kids and who are dealing and balancing schooling at home, right, in this virtual world versus trying to work at home. Like, you know, I feel like I have a voice around that and people listen. And so then on a personal note, you know, it's funny because I really wish people would really, you know, ask me more about my heritage and my background. And that, you know, and I think there's something about understanding who people are beyond just what you see, right? You know, if you know, now that I've divulged or told the world that, you know, my dad's Nigerian and this is the culture that I grew up in, and my mom's Creole, right? And so, you know, they very passionate people, very hot, fiery people. So we would always have conversations that were heated, you know, again, not arguments, but very heated debates and, you know, banter back and forth. But that's sometimes why I do what I do and I engage in certain ways. And I'm very forward and direct because that was my upbringing. That's my background. So you'll better understand me if you understand where I come from. And I think when we talk about diversity, especially on a personal side, getting vulnerable, I think we have to ask people, tell me about your background, right? Like if you grew up in white suburbia and you never encountered a Black person until you came to corporate America, that helps me understand who you are as an individual and how your personal life has shaped who you are as a professional. So personally, I just wish people would ask, you know, okay, Ngozi, who are you? Like, why do you have dreadlocks? Like, why, what is your, you know, what culturally, what are you all about, to help me better understand who you are personally, hence professionally. So I don't know if that answered.
You know, I love that. I think you've unpacked a lot there. And I think you probably resonated with many, many people who are listening to this because, you know, the one subject we all know better than anything is ourselves. Right. And it's the one thing that we're most able to talk about. Maybe we don't want to, but I think there's just so much there. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And we're going to have a separate coffee because I want to know all about your your dreadlocks. I want to know about what it's like to live in a Creole and Nigerian household. I cannot even imagine. I bet you had just the best food ever. So as we're getting kind of to the end, tell me who's been an ally to you and what did that look like?
The list is long. The list is long. I would even say, if we look at the broad definition of ally, and I see there's some conversation around allyship here, even within our chat, but you've been an ally. Just being able to have this conversation with you and you recognizing that, hey, I need to better understand, right? I'm here to learn, right? I think is allyship behavior, right? Kimberly's been an ally, even, to the extent that when I reflect on my 25 years, there's people I can identify. Oh, wow. Yeah. They were a voice for me. They put their, with their privilege on the line for me. They use their privilege towards action or their power towards action. And so, you start to recognize that, maybe where you didn't recognize before, you've had potentially allies all along, right? And again, allyship does not have to be grand in scale. I really believe it doesn't have to be. It can be very individualized and personalized. So I'll say, even the whole alliance, right? The fact that you're on, part of this conference, you're recognizing that we have to be better together, right? And I think, again, making that first step is, again, the first step to allyship. So, the list is long. I think there's so many different people out there that I could name. I
remember at our first, one of the conferences that I spoke at, with the Alliance. And I'm just like, this is an on the spot memory of this, but I remember it very loud and clear now that we called the men in the room our male allies. And we said, this is an alliance for women, but we want men to be included as well, because they're our allies as well. And it's just, I love where we are today. I'm as upside down as the world feels, as, I'm in a corner in my house trying to find the quietest spot I can get into with my daughter doing school, me working from home, my husband working from home, and I have a cat that's decided that for the first time in its life it wants to meow. He's like been the whole time. I'm like, you've been quiet for all these years. But it's just, to see where we are today is pretty remarkable, and it gives me an incredible sense of hope. And I think we all need that, right? And again, I'm going to plug Ted Lasso, and if you watch it, you'll get why hope is so important. Didn't intend to do this as a shameless plug for a television show, but there's a lot of leadership lessons there.
Yeah.
But I am I'm incredibly honored just to be part of the conversation with you. And leave us. We've got like just 2 minutes left. Leave us with what gives you hope.
I think what gives me hope is everyone, and I think I put this in one of the other conversations here today. I think everyone has a role in this diversity movement, right? Everyone has a role. And I'm encouraged by the number of people who have stepped up and owned their role and have been accountable for their role in this conversation. And so the same, I think, for me is around allyship. We can all be allies. And, again, going through some of the chat conversation, you're right. I mean, an ally can be, your colleague, doesn't have to be someone above you, or it could be someone below you, right? Who use, again, their power and their privilege. But I think we all have to recognize we have some level of power and some level of privilege, right? Depending on what that looks like and who you're trying to be an ally for, use it. We can all be allies.
Right. Well, I just want to thank everybody who has been a part of this session. I want to thank Kimberly for reaching out and making this incredible connection for me with my new best friend. And I am just so inspired by everyone for being just part of this and interested and wanting to broaden their horizons. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.